Some secrets don't stay buried. They wait for the right person to wear them back into the light. The silk felt cool against my skin as I adjusted the scarf in the reflection of the hotel's gilded mirror. My mother had left it to me years ago, folded carefully inside a cedar box that still carried the faint scent of lavender. I rarely wore it. The cream-colored silk seemed too elegant for someone like me, someone who spent most days restoring damaged fabrics in a quiet conservation studio on the Lower East Side. But tonight was different. The Langford Foundation Gala was hosting one of the largest historical textile auctions in Manhattan, and my supervisor had insisted I attend. According to her, networking mattered. According to me, it was 3 hours of pretending I belonged in rooms built for people with more money than common sense. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars. Champagne glasses caught the golden light. String music drifted through the air. Men in tailored tuxedos discussed investments while women in designer gowns moved through the crowd like they owned gravity itself. I felt completely out of place. My fingers found the edge of the scarf wrapped loosely around my neck. It was my safety habit. Whenever I was nervous, I touched the silk. The fabric had become a connection to someone I barely remembered. My mother died when I was young. At least, that was the story I'd always been told. The auction curator was halfway through a speech when I noticed him. Not because he was trying to draw attention. Quite the opposite. He stood near the back of the ballroom, away from the spotlight, holding a glass of whiskey. Tall, dark suit, silver watch. The kind of man who looked perfectly comfortable in silence. People seemed aware of him even when they weren't speaking to him. They glanced his way, adjusted their posture, lowered their voices. The room bent around him without him needing to move. I didn't know his name, but something about him made me look twice. Then his eyes found me. The reaction was immediate. Strange. His expression changed so quickly I almost thought I imagined it. The calm disappeared. The glass in his hand froze halfway to his lips. He wasn't looking at my face. He was staring at the scarf. For 3 long seconds, he didn't blink. Around us, conversations continued. Music played. Waiters crossed the floor carrying trays of champagne. But the moment felt detached from everything else. His gaze locked onto the silk as though he'd seen a ghost. Then something unexpected happened. The whiskey glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered. The sound echoed through the ballroom. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. A dozen people looked toward the disturbance. The man didn't seem to notice. His eyes remained fixed on me, on the scarf, on whatever he thought it meant. My heartbeat quickened. I took a small step backward. Across the room, he set the remains of the glass aside without looking down. Then he started walking toward me. Not hurried, not uncertain, purposeful. Every person in his path instinctively moved aside. I felt a strange pressure building in my chest. The closer he came, the stronger the feeling became. As though something impossible was about to happen. He stopped a few feet away. His eyes never left the silk. Then, in a voice low enough that only I could hear, he said 5 words that made my blood run cold. That scarf should not exist. For a moment, I could not breathe. The noise of the ballroom seemed to fade behind the steady pounding of my heart. I stared at him, searching his face for some explanation, some hint that this was a misunderstanding. Instead, I found something even stranger. Fear. Not my fear. His. It was subtle, buried beneath layers of control, but it was there. His eyes remained fixed on the scarf wrapped around my neck, as though it carried answers to questions neither of us had asked. What do you mean? I finally managed. My voice sounded smaller than I intended. He looked at me then. Not the scarf. Me. The shift was immediate. Whatever emotion had slipped through vanished behind a wall of composure. Where did you get it? He asked. The question came so quickly that I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Hundreds of people filled the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung above us. Somewhere behind me, the auctioneer was attempting to restore order after the shattered glass. Yet this man seemed interested in only one thing. It belonged to my mother, I said carefully. Something flickered across his face. A reaction so brief I nearly missed it. Your mother. He repeated the words quietly, as if testing them. Before I could answer, another man approached from the side. He was older, dressed in a dark suit, carrying himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to important conversations. Mr. Moretti, he said. Everyone is waiting for you. Moretti. The name sounded familiar. I had heard it before. Newspaper articles, business headlines, charity foundations, real estate acquisitions. The kind of name attached to entire sections of Manhattan. Adrian Moretti. Suddenly, I understood why people had moved out of his way, why the room seemed to orbit around him. But Adrian barely acknowledged the interruption. His attention remained on me. "Your mother gave it to you?" he asked. "No," I said. "She passed away when I was little." It was left with some of her things. A strange silence followed. He looked away for the first time since approaching me. His jaw tightened. His gaze shifted toward the far windows overlooking the city skyline. The lights of Manhattan stretched into the darkness beyond the glass. For a second, he seemed somewhere else entirely. Then he looked back at me. "How old are you?" The question caught me off guard. 28. Another silence. The older man beside him shifted uncomfortably. "Adrian," he warned softly. Adrian ignored him. "And your mother's name?" I hesitated. Something about the question felt personal in a way that made me instinctively protective. But I answered anyway. "Evelyn Bennett." The reaction was immediate. Not dramatic. Not loud. Somehow worse. The color drained from his face. The room around us continued moving. People laughed. Glasses clinked. Music drifted through the air. Yet Adrian Moretti stood perfectly still, like a man who had just seen the impossible. Then he whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. "That is not possible." Before I could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Whatever message appeared there changed everything. His expression hardened. The vulnerability disappeared. The walls returned. He slipped the phone into his pocket and took one step backward. "Do not leave this gala alone tonight, Claire." My stomach tightened. I had never told him my name. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me standing beneath the chandeliers with 1,000 questions and one terrifying realization. Somehow, Adrian Moretti knew far more about me than he should have. I stood frozen long after Adrian disappeared into the crowd. The gala slowly returned to life around me, conversations resuming as though nothing unusual had happened. Yet I could not shake the feeling that something had shifted. The city lights beyond the ballroom windows looked different now. Sharper, colder, as if Manhattan itself knew a secret I did not. I reached for the scarf again. My fingers traced the smooth silk while Adrian's words echoed in my head. "That scarf should not exist. That is not possible." None of it made sense. My mother had been gone for more than 20 years. She had never been famous, never wealthy, never connected to powerful men with names that appeared in financial magazines. She had simply been my mother, or at least the version of her I had spent my entire life believing in. An hour later, I finally escaped the ballroom. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt strangely quiet. I stepped outside onto Fifth Avenue and inhaled the cool spring air. The street glowed beneath rows of golden lights. Taxis rolled past. People hurried along the sidewalks. Everything looked normal. I told myself I was overreacting. Adrian Moretti was probably mistaken. Maybe he had confused my mother with someone else. Maybe the scarf reminded him of an old memory. There were countless reasonable explanations. Yet none of them explained how he knew my name. My phone buzzed as I started walking toward the parking garage. A message from my friend Lauren appeared on the screen. "How was the fancy gala?" I almost laughed. I typed back one sentence. "Weirdest night of my life." Before I could send anything else, another notification appeared. Unknown number. The message contained only 6 words. "Do not throw away the scarf." I stopped walking. My pulse immediately quickened. I stared at the screen. No greeting. No explanation. No signature. Just 6 words. I looked around instinctively. People moved past me carrying shopping bags and coffee cups. Nobody seemed interested in me. Nobody appeared suspicious. Yet the message felt personal. Deliberate. I quickly typed a reply. "Who is this?" The response arrived less than 10 seconds later. "Trust nobody who asks for it." A chill moved through me. Then the number disappeared. Not blocked. Gone. When I tried calling, the screen displayed an error message. My hands suddenly felt cold despite the mild evening temperature. By the time I reached my apartment in Brooklyn, I had convinced myself to stop obsessing over it. Anonymous messages happened all the time. Wrong numbers. Internet scams. Harmless nonsense. But as I unlocked my door and stepped inside, another surprise waited for me. A package sat on the floor just beyond the entrance. There was no shipping label, no return address, no note. My stomach tightened. Slowly, I carried it to the kitchen table and opened the plain cardboard box. Inside lay a single object. An old photograph. The edges were yellowed with age. The image showed a woman standing beside a lake sometime in the early 1990s. She was smiling at the camera. My breath caught instantly. It was my mother, and standing beside her was a young boy with pale eyes that looked exactly like Adrian Moretti's. I stared at the photograph until the numbers on the microwave clock blurred together. Midnight came and went. Still, I sat at the kitchen table with the picture in my hands. My mother looked younger than I had ever imagined her. Her smile was bright, relaxed, real, nothing like the faded photographs stored in old family albums. But it was the boy beside her that kept pulling my attention back. He could not have been older than 10. Dark hair, serious expression, pale eyes. The resemblance to Adrian Moretti was impossible to ignore. I turned the photograph over. My breath caught. Written in faded blue ink were 4 words. Lake Evergreen. Summer. Do not forget. I read them 3 times. The handwriting was unfamiliar. At least I thought it was. Something about the letters felt strangely recognizable, like a melody heard years ago and nearly forgotten. I grabbed my phone and searched Lake Evergreen. Hundreds of results appeared. Parks, campgrounds, vacation rentals. But one result stood out immediately. Lake Evergreen Preserve. Upstate New York. Less than 3 hours from Manhattan. The same place shown in the photograph. A coincidence. It had to be. Yet my instincts told me otherwise. My apartment suddenly felt too quiet. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the street below. Brooklyn was never completely asleep. Cars passed. Streetlights glowed. Somewhere a dog barked. Everything looked normal. Then I noticed the black sedan parked across the street. Maybe it had been there for hours. Maybe I was imagining things. But the longer I looked, the more unsettled I felt. The vehicle never moved. Its headlights remained off. I stepped back from the window and laughed nervously at myself. Adrian Moretti had planted ideas in my head. Anonymous messages. Strange photographs. Powerful men who somehow knew my name. I was allowing imagination to turn ordinary events into something mysterious. That explanation lasted exactly 4 minutes. My phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Silence greeted me at first. Then a woman's voice. Older. Calm. Claire Bennett. My grip tightened around the phone. Who is this? Another pause. You need to leave your apartment tomorrow morning. Every muscle in my body tensed. What? Go to Lake Evergreen. The woman spoke as though reading instructions she had memorized long ago. Take the scarf. Do not tell anyone where you are going. My pulse hammered in my ears. How do you know about the scarf? Silence. Then a quiet sigh. Because your mother trusted the wrong people. The line went dead. I immediately called back. The number was disconnected. Not unavailable. Disconnected. As though it had never existed. I stood motionless in the center of my kitchen. My heart refused to slow down. The photograph remained on the table. The scarf rested over the back of a chair. Both seemed harmless. Ordinary. Yet somehow they felt connected to a story that had begun long before I was born. I barely slept that night. Every sound pulled me awake. Every passing car sent me back to the window. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I would drive to Lake Evergreen. Not because I trusted anonymous voices. Not because I believed in conspiracies. But because for the first time in my life, I had a chance to learn the truth about my mother. At 8:15 that morning, I packed a small overnight bag, wrapped the scarf carefully inside, and headed for the parking garage. What I did not know was that someone else was already waiting there. Someone who had been watching my apartment since before dawn. The concrete parking garage smelled faintly of rain and motor oil. My footsteps echoed as I walked toward my car, overnight bag slung over one shoulder. The morning rush had already begun outside, but down here everything felt strangely still. I spotted my blue Honda near the far corner and immediately noticed something unusual. A white envelope rested beneath the windshield wiper. My stomach tightened. I glanced around the garage. A few vehicles sat parked on distant levels. No one appeared nearby. Slowly, I approached the car and removed the envelope. There was no name on the front. No address. Just a single black line drawn across the center. Inside was a folded piece of paper. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. One sentence stared back at me. Trust the photograph. Not the story. I read it twice. 3 times. The message made even less sense than the others. What story? Whose story? Before I could think further, a familiar voice spoke from behind me. You are either incredibly brave or incredibly stubborn. I froze, then turned. Adrian Moretti stood 20 feet away beside a concrete pillar. Dark coat, calm expression, hands in his pockets. As though finding him in my parking garage on a Tuesday morning was completely normal. My heart skipped. "How long have you been standing there?" I asked. "Long enough." His eyes moved briefly to the envelope in my hand. "You received one too." That answer raised more questions than it solved. "You have been following me?" He looked almost amused. "If I were following you, Claire, you would not have noticed." I hated that part of me found the statement convincing. "Then why are you here?" For the first time, his expression grew serious. "Because you are driving to Lake Evergreen." The certainty in his voice made me uneasy. "How do you know that?" "Because someone wants you there." The answer sent a chill through me. Adrian walked closer, stopping a respectful distance away. Morning light filtered through the garage entrance behind him. "The question is why?" I folded my arms. "Maybe that is exactly what I am trying to find out." His gaze settled on the overnight bag, then on the scarf peeking from the partially open zipper. Something unreadable crossed his face. Not fear this time. Sadness. "There are things about your mother you do not know. Apparently, everyone knows that except me." The words came out sharper than intended. Adrian accepted the criticism without reacting. "Fair point." Silence stretched between us. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me all night. "Who was the boy in the photograph?" His jaw tightened. The smallest reaction, but enough. "You know him?" Adrian looked away for a moment. Toward the garage exit. Toward the city beyond. When he finally answered, his voice was quieter than before. "Yes." My pulse quickened. "Who was he?" Another pause. Then Adrian met my eyes. He was me. The world seemed to tilt. Every theory I had built over the past 12 hours collapsed at once. I looked down at the photograph still tucked inside my bag. Then back at Adrian. Nothing about this was possible. Yet the certainty in his expression left no room for doubt. And somehow, I knew the next answer would change everything. "Then tell me," I whispered. "How did my mother know you?" Adrian did not answer immediately. The silence stretched between us while cars entered and exited the garage in the distance. For the first time since I had met him, he looked uncertain. Not afraid. Not nervous. Just reluctant. As though the truth carried a weight he had spent years trying to put down. "Because she saved me," he finally said. I blinked. "Saved you from what?" His gaze shifted toward the photograph sticking out of my bag. "From becoming someone I did not want to be." The answer frustrated me instantly. "That is not an answer." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I know." He took a slow breath. "When I was 10 years old, my family spent one summer near Lake Evergreen. My father had business in the area. I hated it there." He glanced upward, as though searching old memories hidden somewhere beyond the concrete ceiling. "I was angry all the time. Isolated. I did not have friends. Then one afternoon I met your mother. I listened carefully. Every word felt important. She worked at a small bookstore near the lake. She was young, maybe 20. She treated me like a normal kid. Not like the son of an important family. Not like someone special. Something softened in his expression. She used to recommend books. We would sit on the dock for hours discussing stories. I stared at him. The image felt impossible to reconcile with the man standing before me. My mother never mentioned any of this. I doubt she would have. Adrian's voice grew quieter. Some memories become complicated with time. I thought about the photograph again. The genuine smile on Evelyn Bennett's face. The young boy beside her. Suddenly the image felt less mysterious and more personal. More real. "What happened after that summer?" I asked. Adrian looked away. The softness vanished. "That is where the story becomes difficult." My stomach tightened. Difficult how? Before he could answer, his phone vibrated. He checked the screen and immediately frowned. Not anger. Concern. The reaction lasted only a second, but I noticed it. Adrian slipped the phone back into his pocket. "We should leave." "Leave? Now?" Every instinct in me resisted being ordered around. "I am not going anywhere until you finish explaining." His eyes met mine. "Claire, listen carefully. Someone else knows you received that photograph." A chill moved through me. "How?" "Because they sent it." The realization hit harder than I expected. Of course. Whoever delivered the photograph wanted me to find it. Wanted me to ask questions. Wanted me moving toward answers. Adrian stepped closer. Not threatening. Protective. "The trip to Lake Evergreen was never your idea. Someone guided you there." I hated how true that sounded. The anonymous messages. The phone call. The photograph. The envelope. Every step had been arranged. Why? I whispered. Adrian's expression hardened. Because somebody wants you to uncover something that has remained hidden for 28 years. My pulse quickened. What? He held my gaze for several seconds before answering. I do not know. For the first time since this began, I believed him. Then his eyes dropped to the scarf in my bag. His expression changed again. Recognition. Memory. Regret. But I know one thing. What? Adrian's voice became almost a whisper. Your mother never intended for you to inherit that scarf. The words hit me harder than I expected. I stared at Adrian, waiting for him to explain, but his expression suggested he had already said more than he intended. What does that mean? I asked. Why would my mother not want me to have it? Adrian exhaled slowly. Because it was never meant to be a family keepsake. The parking garage suddenly felt colder. Then what is it? His eyes settled on the scarf. A message. My heart skipped. A message from who? That is the problem. He glanced toward the garage entrance again, as though calculating something only he could see. I do not know. Frustration surged through me. Every answer seemed to create 3 more questions. You keep saying that. Because it is the truth. He met my gaze directly. There are pieces missing from this story, Claire. Important pieces. Before I could respond, a soft chime sounded from my phone. An email notification. Neither of us moved for a second. Then I unlocked the screen. The sender field was blank. No address. No name. Just an attachment. My stomach tightened immediately. Another message? Adrian asked. I nodded. The attachment contained a scanned document. Old. Yellowed. Slightly faded around the edges. At the top was a date. August 12, 1998. Beneath it sat a single sentence typed in black ink. If anything happens to me, tell Claire the truth about Lake Evergreen. My breath caught. Adrian stepped closer. Not close enough to invade my space. Close enough to read the screen. The color drained from his face. You have seen this before, I said quietly. It was not a question. He remained silent for several seconds. Then he nodded. Yes. My pulse hammered in my ears. Where? Adrian looked away. A long time ago. That is not good enough. For the first time, a flash of irritation crossed his face. Not directed at me. Directed at himself. You think I do not know that? The question surprised both of us. He immediately regained control, but the crack had appeared. The perfect composure was slipping. 28 years, he said quietly. 28 years I believed one version of what happened. Then you walked into that ballroom wearing that scarf, and suddenly nothing makes sense anymore. The honesty in his voice stopped me cold. This was not a man protecting secrets for power. This was a man confronting the possibility that he had been wrong. A distant engine echoed through the garage. Adrian turned toward the sound instantly. His attention sharpened. We need to leave. You already said that. And I meant it. Something in his tone made me stop arguing. I followed his gaze. A dark SUV had entered the garage and was slowly moving between the rows of parked vehicles. Maybe it was nothing. A resident. A visitor. Yet Adrian's posture changed completely. Calm became alert. Come with me, he said. Where? Lake Evergreen. I stared at him. You are coming too? His answer came without hesitation. After what happened this morning, there is no chance I am letting you go there alone. Then his eyes shifted back to the glowing screen in my hand. Because whoever sent that email knows something neither of us were supposed to discover. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in the passenger seat of a black sedan heading north out of Brooklyn. The city slipped past the windows in shades of steel and glass, while silence settled between us. Adrian drove with the calm focus of someone accustomed to making decisions quickly and never second-guessing them. I watched the skyline fade behind us and wondered how my life had unraveled so completely in less than 24 hours. Yesterday, I had been preparing fabrics for a museum exhibit. Today, I was driving toward a lake tied to secrets my mother had apparently carried to her grave. The scarf rested folded in my lap. I could not stop looking at it. What exactly are we expecting to find? I finally asked. Adrian kept his eyes on the road. I do not know. You keep saying that too. A faint smile appeared. Because uncertainty is an honest answer. I sighed and leaned back against the seat. The highway stretched ahead beneath a bright spring sky. Traffic thinned as Manhattan disappeared behind us. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Adrian surprised me. Your mother used to hate unanswered questions. I turned toward him immediately. You really knew her? Yes. His voice softened. She believed every mystery could be solved if you were willing to look long enough. The comment sounded so personal that it made my chest tighten. Nobody had ever described my mother that way before. Most people spoke about her as a memory, a tragedy, a photograph. Adrian spoke about her like a real person. Somewhere along the drive, the tension between us shifted. Not gone, just different. Less like two strangers trapped in the same puzzle and more like reluctant allies trying to solve it together. Around noon, we stopped at a small roadside diner outside Kingston. The kind of place with red booths, endless coffee, and waitresses who called everyone honey. It felt wonderfully normal compared to everything else happening. We sat near a window overlooking the parking lot. I wrapped both hands around a mug of coffee while Adrian reviewed something on his phone. Then his expression changed. "What?" I asked immediately. He looked up. "A name." My pulse quickened. "What name?" Adrian turned the screen toward me. An old newspaper archive filled the display. Most of the article had been damaged during scanning, but one sentence remained visible. Local bookstore employee Evelyn Bennett assists visitors during annual summer festival. Below the article sat a grainy photograph. My breath caught. It was my mother, younger than I had ever seen her, standing beside a wooden sign. Behind her, partially visible near the edge of the frame, was a familiar symbol embroidered onto a banner. The exact same symbol hidden inside the scarf. My heart began racing. That cannot be a coincidence. Adrian nodded slowly. "It is not." Before I could ask another question, a folded piece of paper slipped from inside the newspaper clipping displayed on the screen. Not digitally, physically, hidden inside the archived image file. Someone had attached a scanned note. Adrian opened it. We both read the message at the same time. "Meet me at the old boathouse before sunset. Come alone." Signed only with a single letter. E. The note remained on the screen long after neither of us spoke. I read the message again, then again. The single letter at the bottom felt heavier each time. E. My mother had been Evelyn Bennett. My pulse refused to slow. "Do you think she wrote this?" I asked quietly. Adrian stared at the display. "The document is nearly 30 years old. That does not answer the question." He closed the file and set the phone on the table between us. "I think someone wanted us to believe she wrote it." The distinction mattered. I could see it in his eyes. Hope and caution pulling in opposite directions. We left the diner an hour later and continued north. The landscape gradually changed. Glass towers gave way to rolling hills. Highways narrowed into two-lane roads lined with trees just beginning to bloom. The farther we traveled, the more familiar everything felt despite the fact that I had never been there. It made no sense. Yet every curve in the road seemed to tug at some forgotten corner of memory. By late afternoon, we reached Lake Evergreen. The water stretched across the horizon like polished silver beneath the sunlight. Small docks extended into the lake. Wooden cabins dotted the shoreline. Families walked along the paths carrying fishing poles and picnic baskets. It looked peaceful, ordinary, exactly the kind of place where secrets should not exist. Adrian parked near a weathered information sign. Neither of us moved immediately. "The boathouse?" I asked. He nodded toward the far side of the lake. Half a mile that direction. We followed a narrow trail beneath tall maple trees. Dry leaves crunched beneath our shoes. The scent of fresh water drifted through the air. Every few minutes I touched the scarf folded inside my bag, reassuring myself it was still there. The closer we got to the shoreline, the stronger the strange feeling became. Not fear, recognition, as though I had been there before and simply forgotten. The boathouse appeared between the trees just before sunset. It stood alone at the end of a small dock, old but well-maintained. White paint faded by decades of weather. The lake behind it reflected streaks of gold and orange from the evening sky. My heartbeat quickened. We approached slowly. The front door stood slightly open. Adrian noticed it immediately. So did I. We exchanged a glance, then stepped inside. Dust floated through beams of sunlight filtering between the wooden boards. The room was empty except for a workbench near the back wall. On top rested a small metal box. My breath caught. Someone had left it there intentionally. There was no lock, no label, just a single symbol engraved into the lid. The same symbol hidden inside the scarf. My hands trembled as I lifted the top. Inside lay a cassette tape, a silver key, and a folded letter addressed in elegant handwriting. To Claire. For a moment the entire world seemed to stop. Adrian stared at the envelope. I stared at my own name written across the front. Then I noticed something that made the hairs rise along my arms. The ink looked fresh. Not 30 years old. Not even 30 days old. Whoever left the letter had been there recently. For several seconds, neither of us touched the envelope. The lake outside lapped softly against the dock. Evening sunlight spilled through the dusty windows, painting long shadows across the wooden floor. Everything felt impossibly quiet. Then I reached for the letter. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. The paper inside was crisp. Recent. Not something hidden away for decades. Someone had written this knowing I would find it. The first line stole the air from my lungs. Claire, if you are reading this, then you have already met Adrian again. I looked up instantly. Adrian's expression hardened. What does it say? He asked. I continued reading aloud. I know you have questions. I know you deserve answers. But before you trust anyone, remember this. Memory is not the same thing as truth. My heartbeat quickened. The handwriting was elegant and steady. Whoever wrote the letter had taken their time. The next paragraph made my stomach tighten. Adrian believes he remembers the summer of 1998. He remembers friendship. He remembers books. He remembers a promise. What he does not remember is why I disappeared. Silence filled the room. I slowly lowered the page. Adrian stared at me. For the first time since I met him, genuine confusion crossed his face. Not guarded uncertainty. Genuine confusion. I never knew why she left, he said quietly. I looked back at the letter. There was more. Much more. If you have found this box, then the key inside belongs to you now. It opens a locker located beneath the old train station on Hawthorne Road. Inside is something your mother wanted protected until the right time. My pulse hammered in my ears. Hawthorne Road. The name meant nothing to me. Yet whoever wrote this clearly expected me to know exactly what to do. Then I reached the final lines. They changed everything. Do not look for my grave. You will not find me there. The paper nearly slipped from my fingers. Adrian took a slow step forward. Read that again. I did. The words sounded even more impossible the second time. Do not look for my grave. You will not find me there. A chill moved through the room. For 28 years I had believed my mother was gone. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone of my life had been shaped by that certainty. Yet the letter suggested something else entirely. Not directly, not explicitly, but enough to shatter everything I thought I knew. I lowered the page and noticed one final sentence written near the bottom. Smaller than the rest. Almost hidden. Claire, if Adrian brought you here, then he kept his promise. Tell him I never stopped believing he would. The room fell silent. I looked at Adrian. He looked at me. Neither of us spoke. Then, from somewhere outside the boathouse, a bell began to ring across the lake. Slow. Hollow. Familiar. Adrian turned toward the window immediately. That is impossible, he whispered. What? I asked. His eyes remained fixed on the distant shoreline. That bell tower has been abandoned for more than 20 years. The bell rang again. Slow. Deliberate. The sound drifted across the water like a memory refusing to stay buried. Adrian moved to the window while I followed close behind. Through the fading sunlight, I could just make out the silhouette of the old bell tower on the far side of the lake. It stood partially hidden among the trees, weathered by decades of storms and forgotten summers. Yet the sound was unmistakable. Someone had rung that bell. You are sure it has been abandoned? I asked. Adrian nodded without taking his eyes off the shoreline. The town closed access years ago. Another bell tone echoed across the water. My pulse quickened. Everything about this place felt like it was waking up around us. The letter, the key, the photograph, now the bell. It was as though someone had carefully arranged a trail and wanted us to follow it. I looked back at the items inside the metal box. The cassette tape suddenly seemed more important than before. Do you think we can play it? Adrian turned from the window. Maybe. He picked up the tape and examined it carefully. A small handwritten label sat on the side. The date read June 14th, 1998. The same summer from the photograph. The same summer Adrian met my mother. My hands felt unsteady. There has to be something on it. Adrian agreed. Which means we need a cassette player. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. The sound felt strange after everything that had happened. Do those even still exist? To my surprise, Adrian smiled. Lake towns never throw anything away. The fading tension between us returned for a brief moment. Not because the mystery had become easier. Because we were finally moving toward answers instead of questions. Outside, the sky deepened into shades of orange and blue. We packed the contents of the box carefully. I slipped the letter into my bag beside the scarf while Adrian secured the key and cassette tape. Before leaving, I took one final look around the boathouse. The room seemed ordinary now. Empty. Quiet. Yet something caught my attention near the workbench. A small carving etched into the wood. I stepped closer. My breath caught immediately. The same symbol hidden inside the scarf had been carved there years ago. Beneath it sat two initials. E.B. I traced the letters with my fingertips. Evelyn Bennett. There was no doubt. My mother had stood in this exact spot. Adrian joined me and stared at the carving. His expression softened. She did that. The certainty in his voice surprised me. How do you know? A distant smile appeared. Because she carved her initials into every place she loved. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The image of my mother became clearer than it had ever been before. Not a photograph. Not a memory. A real person who left pieces of herself behind. Then Adrian noticed something I had missed. Directly beneath the initials was a second carving. Smaller. Older. 2 letters. A.M. My eyes widened. Adrian stared at the mark as though seeing a ghost. You carved yours too, I whispered. He nodded slowly. Apparently I did. The realization settled between us. 28 years ago, a young woman and a lonely boy had stood together inside this boathouse and left proof they had been there. And for the first time, I began to wonder whether the greatest secret at Lake Evergreen was not what happened to my mother afterward. It was why someone had spent nearly 3 decades trying to erase the fact that she and Adrian had ever known each other at all. We left the boathouse just as darkness settled across the lake. The air carried the cool scent of water and pine trees while distant lights began appearing in cabin windows along the shoreline. Neither of us spoke during the walk back to the car. My mind was too full. The carved initials, the letter, the cassette tape. Every discovery answered one question while creating 5 more. By the time we reached the small inn where Adrian had reserved 2 rooms for the night, exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders. Yet sleep felt impossible. An hour later we sat in the inn's tiny library surrounded by shelves of aging books and faded photographs of Lake Evergreen from decades past. The owner had somehow located an old cassette player in a storage closet. The machine looked ancient, but when Adrian inserted the tape and pressed play, the reels began turning. Static filled the room. Then a voice emerged. My breath caught instantly. It was my mother's voice. I had never heard it before. Not truly. Home videos had never survived. Audio recordings did not exist. Yet suddenly she was there. Real. Alive. If you are listening to this, she said softly, then something happened exactly the way I feared it might. Tears immediately blurred my vision. Adrian sat completely still beside me. The recording continued. My name is Evelyn Bennett, and there is a truth that was hidden to protect a child who never deserved to carry it. The room seemed to shrink around us. My heart pounded louder with every word. 28 years ago, a mistake was made. Not by Adrian. Not by me. By people who believed power mattered more than honesty. Adrian lowered his eyes. The tape crackled briefly. Then my mother's voice returned. If Claire ever finds this recording, she deserves to know that her life began with a lie. The words struck like lightning. I gripped the edge of the table. Across from me, Adrian looked equally stunned. Claire, my mother continued, the man listed on your birth certificate was never your father. Silence followed. Just static. My pulse thundered in my ears. Every certainty I had ever possessed shattered in an instant. Then the recording resumed. I wanted to tell you when you were older. I planned to explain everything. But circumstances changed faster than I expected. Adrian slowly leaned forward. His attention never left the cassette player. The truth is hidden inside the locker beneath Hawthorne Road Station. That is where I left the documents. That is where the answers remain. My throat felt tight. Questions flooded my mind faster than I could process them. If the man who raised me was not my father, then who was? Why had my mother hidden the truth? Why had she vanished? The tape crackled one final time. Then her voice softened. And Adrian, if you are hearing this too, then I need you to forgive yourself. What happened was never your fault. Adrian closed his eyes. For the first time since I met him, I saw genuine pain cross his face. Not fear. Not regret. Grief. The recording ended with a click. Silence filled the library. Neither of us moved. Then Adrian opened his eyes and looked directly at me. Tomorrow morning, he said quietly, we go to Hawthorne Road Station. And somehow I knew that whatever waited inside that locker would change both of our lives forever. The next morning arrived gray and quiet. A light mist hung over Lake Evergreen as Adrian and I drove toward Hawthorne Road Station. Neither of us spoke much during the trip. The recording had changed everything. My mother's voice still echoed in my mind. Your life began with a lie. The words followed me through every mile. By the time we reached the station, the clouds had begun to lift. The building stood abandoned at the edge of town, its brick walls faded by time and weather. Old train tracks stretched into the distance, disappearing beneath weeds and wild grass. It looked forgotten, yet somehow it felt like the center of everything. Adrian parked beside the entrance and stepped out first. I followed, gripping the silver key tightly in my hand. Inside, dust floated through shafts of sunlight pouring from broken windows high above. The station was silent except for the creak of old wood and the faint whistle of wind. We followed signs toward the lower storage level. The staircase led underground into a narrow corridor lined with metal lockers. Hundreds of them stood side by side. Most were rusted shut, forgotten, waiting. Then I saw it. Locker 117. The same symbol from the scarf had been scratched into the metal door. My pulse quickened. I stepped forward and inserted the key. For a second, nothing happened. Then the lock clicked. The sound seemed to echo forever. Slowly, I opened the door. Inside rested a single leather portfolio. No money, no valuables, just documents. My hands trembled as I carried it to a nearby bench. Adrian sat beside me. Together we opened the portfolio. The first page was a birth certificate. My name stood at the top. Claire Evelyn Bennett. My eyes immediately moved to the section listing parents. My breath stopped. The father's name was blank. Completely blank. The next document explained why. It was a letter written by my mother. Claire, if you are reading this, then you are finally old enough to know the truth. There was never a father who abandoned you. There was never a secret man who disappeared. I chose to raise you alone because the truth would have placed too many lives under a shadow that did not belong to them. Tears blurred my vision. Adrian remained silent beside me. I continued reading. You were never hidden because you were unwanted. You were protected because you were loved. The next pages revealed financial records, photographs, and legal correspondence proving something extraordinary. For nearly 3 decades, an anonymous trust had quietly paid for every major expense in my life. School tuition, medical bills, college assistance, rent support during difficult years. The name attached to the trust appeared only once. Adrian Moretti. I turned toward him so quickly that the papers slipped from my hands. His expression was filled with shock. Genuine shock. I did not know, he said immediately. I swear to you, Claire, I never knew. Looking into his eyes, I believed him. Someone had created the trust using his family name without ever telling him. Then I reached the final page. Another letter. This one addressed to Adrian. His hands shook slightly as he unfolded it. He read silently at first. Then his eyes closed. When he finally looked up, there was peace in his expression for the first time since I met him. What does it say? I whispered. Adrian smiled sadly. It says she forgave me years ago. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds and spilled across the old station windows. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The mystery that had begun with the scarf was finally over. My mother had not left behind wealth or power. She had left behind truth. And standing there beside Adrian, I finally understood something she had known all along. Some secrets survive in darkness, but the right people bring them back into the light.